Let's shift now to the war between Israel and Hamas and the political and social fallout here in the U.S. Later in the show, I'll talk to the executive director of the Council of American Islamic Relations. But first, joining me now is Anti-Defamation League President Jonathan Greenblatt. Thank you for joining me today. Jonathan, the FBI has a new warning about what they say is a heightened threat of Hamas-inspired terror attacks in the U.S. Your organization put out a report last week documenting a 400% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the past month. Can you talk about the situation you're seeing on the ground right now?
Well, thank you for having me, Reb. Sure. I mean, we've never seen a moment like this since the ADL was founded. We have seen, shouldn't call it a wave, it's more like a tsunami of anti-Semitic attacks, cases of harassment, vandalism, and violence targeting Jewish Americans. I want to be clear, not Israelis, although that would be wrong. Not, people in IDF uniforms, although that would be wrong. Rev, we're talking about, quote unquote, Zionist businesses. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But a cafe owned by a Jewish family on Long Island, an ice cream parlor owned by Jewish people in San Francisco, a restaurant owned by Jewish people in the Midwest, being tagged, being vandalized, being desecrated. It is inexcusable. And on our college campuses, it is off the charts. Jewish kids getting targeted and victimized, getting bullied and harassed and assaulted at Harvard, at Columbia, at many other universities across the country.
Well, let me stop you right there. Let me stop right there because I know Cornell University canceled classes Friday after a junior engineering student was arrested earlier in the week for alleged anti-Semitic threats. Colleges and universities across the country are facing calls from lawmakers and religious leaders to do more to combat anti-Semitism on campus. And I'll be talking about Islamophobia as well. There's been an increase. But let me ask you, what concrete actions would you like to see these institutions take to protect Jewish students while also respecting free speech? Because there's where the problem comes in.
Well, it shouldn't be a problem, like making death threats against Jewish students, saying to rape Jewish women and to slit the throats of Jewish men, as happened at Cornell. That isn't, free speech. That's a crime. Rev, we need to move from cancel culture, for perceived microaggressions, to consequence culture. When you threaten someone, when you intimidate someone, that should not be allowed in a workplace, on a college campus, anywhere. So what are the concrete steps? Number one, DEI programs, Rev, need to address racism and xenophobia and anti-Semitism. There's no excuse for a college not to address anti-Semitism. Now, and by the way, and anti-Zionist anti-Semitism, as well as classic anti-Semitism. It's all the same.
All right, well,
number two.
Go ahead to number two, and then I'll ask you my next question. Go ahead.
Two, like these student organizations that are taking their cues from Hamas, a foreign terror organization. Look, you're not allowed to promote ISIS. You're not allowed to give material support to al-Qaeda. You shouldn't be able to do it for Hamas. Hamas has the blood on its hands of the dozens of Americans who were killed on October the 7th, the scores of Americans who are kept and kidnapped, bound and gagged in tunnels right now under Gaza. This isn't just a war against the Jews, although for Hamas it is. This is also a war against America, Rev, and that is wrong by any definition.
Biden administration has laid out a new national strategy to combat Islamophobia. Arab American support for Biden has plummeted 42 points since the last election, down to just 17% in a new poll released by the Arab American Institute. You've been a strong advocate for the Jewish community, but you also work with leaders of different faiths, such as myself and others, to take a stand against hate. What are the areas, if any, of common ground right now?
Look, in 2016, when President Trump talked about a Muslim registry, I stood up and said, I'll be the first to register as a Muslim if they do something like that, because that was wrong. And I've consistently spoken out against Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hate, including that young Palestinian child who was killed in Plainview, Illinois last month. Absolutely wrong. I stand up against anti-Muslim hate, Rev, because it's the right thing to do. but we need the Muslim community, including your next guest, to speak out against all forms of anti-Semitism as well. I'm glad the administration is going to come up with a plan, but we need them to implement the anti-Semitism strategy because, Rev, a world in which people are targeted and persecuted because of how they pray, right, or who they worship is wrong. And right now, the anti-Zionist, anti-Semitism, going after Jewish kids, making them unsafe in the places where they study, the shops where they work, there is no excuse. And I will work with any
let me push you on that.
Work on that with me.
Let me follow up on that. The Israeli offensive in Gaza appears to be intensifying. This conflict will likely be a part of our political reality for the foreseeable future. What kinds of steps will your organization take to keep a positive dialogue and ensure attitudes and hearts don't harden as this drags on? Because just like I was outraged on October 7th and expressed it, called you, went on television and saying you cannot use innocent civilians, Jews, for collateral damage. I am also deplorable. I find it deplorable what's going on with children in the Gaza and elders in the Gaza. Wait, let me finish. President Obama, former President Obama, you worked in the Obama administration, has said, what about what's going on in the Gaza? What is going on? We cannot have a sliding morality. If we're against civilians being killed in Israel, we should also be against civilians being killed in the Gaza.
Correct. And, you know, the president, my former boss, he's entitled to academic musings on a podcast. But right now, we need moral clarity in the real world. And thank God Joe Biden is our president. But to your question, this war was initiated, Rev, by Hamas. People were butchered and murdered in Israel by Hamas. Hamas is hiding behind human shields. Gaza is like an open air prison, and Hamas is the warden. So here's what I would say. Rev, keep this in mind and ask your next guest. This could end tomorrow if Hamas returned the hostages, if Hamas said, we'll lay down our arms and negotiate a peace deal with Israel. Rev, this would end like that if they would simply do the right thing. But Rev,
what about those that have asked? What about those that have asked for a ceasefire, or even the Biden administration saying a humanitarian pause? I mean, if Hamas won't, and I'll ask them, my next guest, if Hamas won't do something, Netanyahu's saying no to Biden, he's bearing down. Where do we try to stop innocent people from being killed in Gaza? Children.
If Hamas would just say, we will return the hostages, Rev, I don't think there's any world in which holding elderly people hostage, holding disabled people, holding infants and children hostage, if they return the hostages, this would end. So yes, I believe in a ceasefire after Hamas makes a commitment to return the hostages. By the way, Rev, imagine this for a minute. Imagine if hundreds of Americans were taken hostage in Mexico. Do you think America would hold back? Do you think America would say, well, let's wait and work it out? America would say, any country on planet Earth would say, give us back our children, give us back our elderly, give us back our people. Rev, in black churches across America, they say, let my people go. The Jewish people, the story of Exodus, let my people go. So to Hamas, I say, Rev, and hear this loud and clear, let my people go.
All right. Well, I'm going to raise some of the similar questions because I have very serious concerns on both sides. Thank you for being with us, as always, Jonathan Greenblatt, and we're going to keep fighting hate in the United States.